everything.
Rick Sanchez is known for his reckless behavior and morally questionable actions. From intergalactic heists to extremely dangerous adventures with Morty, his escapades have left a trail of chaos behind them. But what would happen if he had to answer the laws of the United States and was actually charged for his crimes? Let's take a look. We all know Rick often drags Morty into adventures that are not particularly child-friendly, so the first crime he would be charged for would be child endangerment, which is a serious offense in the United States and pretty much every other country on this planet. For example, the episode Morty Night Run, he involves Morty into selling a gun to an assassin, which is another crime we're going to talk about later on. In the same episode, he then drags Morty into Blips and Chits, where he unwittingly throws him into a virtual reality game called Roy. In the game, Morty lives an entire lifetime, which leaves him obviously confused afterward. If we look at the psychological problems an experience like this could cause, Rick would definitely lose his rights to be around Morty. But that isn't even the worst situation he throws Morty in. In the episode Look Who's Purging Now, he forces Morty to watch how countless of people are purged, and later on, he involuntarily gets thrown into this entire scenario. Usually, he would be easily charged with 5 years in prison for that, but if we consider the fact that Morty voluntarily joins these adventures and, if Rick has a good lawyer, he can even pledge that Morty learns something valuable out of these lessons, he could be looking at only 2 years behind bars and a $2,000 fine.
Hoo-ha! Check it out, a dimension where hats wear people.
There are few items in TV shows that are as iconic as the portal gun from Rick, and yet it is a prime example that would get him in trouble with the law. Illegal weapons possession is another serious charge, and while the portal gun isn't your typical weapon, it can be certainly used in dangerous ways such as dodging authorities or accessing restricted areas. You could argue that Rick mostly uses his portal gun for travel and exploration. Its misuse is undeniable. For example, in the episode The Rick Shank Rickdemption, he uses the portal gun directly beneath 2 Gromflomite agents, causing them to fall into the vacuum of space. Most likely the law will see it as a dangerous weapon, and he would face 5 years in prison and a fine of $5,000.
I turned myself into a pickle! I'm Pickle Rick!
Now, after we have talked about the most iconic weapon, let's take a look at one of the most iconic episodes, Pickle Rick, where he also breaks countless laws, with the most notable one being assault. In the episode, he murders multiple rats, which is a minor crime, but the violence doesn't end there. In the high security facility, which he breaks into by the way, he kills multiple guards, which are enough to get him a life sentence. However, if we look at the context of it, he still does it because of the need for survival. The rats and the guards posed an immediate threat of his life, and therefore he could face mitigating circumstances of self-defense. Based on that, he would probably look at 2 years in prison and a fine of $2,000. However, that's not it for the episode. After Rick escaped the facility, he decided to blow the entire building up, and there were not a lot of mitigating circumstances as he already escaped the building and was safe. For arson, he would face 7 years in prison and a $10,000 fine.
Morty, you gotta, come on. You gotta come with me.
What, Rick? What's going on?
I got a surprise for
it's
you,
the middle
Morty.
of the night. What are you talking about?
Come on, I got a surprise for you. Come on, hurry up.
Especially in the first few episodes, Rick is portrayed as a heavy alcoholic, and even though he is drunk out of his mind, he still decides to drive his space vehicle. I think we can all agree that drunk driving is a charge he can get fined for. Now, some might argue that he is not driving any car, but he is driving a spaceship with artificial intelligence and extreme safety measures that could drive it without its help. Unfortunately for Rick, this is not an excuse. If we look at similar charges, there was a man who used the autopilot of a Tesla to drive home after a night of partying and the court still charged him. So that would be another 2 years in prison for Rick, along with a fine of $1,000. Now, if these charges weren't high enough for you, let's take a look at things that would get him imprisoned for a longer period. In the episode The ABC of Beth, he creates a clone of her. If you didn't know, cloning someone in the US is seen as a severe transgression, and the fact that he did this for Beth won't help him. Therefore, Rick would face a hefty punishment, with 10 years behind bars and a fine of $30,000. But it gets worse. In the same episode, we get introduced to Fruity Land, the colorful, fantastical world created by Rick for his daughter Beth. The problem here All the creatures in Fruity Land are genetically transformed, and for the creatures, their existence alone is a life of suffering. Genetic experimentation, especially without ethical considerations, is considered a grave offense, and the law would see these actions as a severe breach of ethical boundaries. 8 years of jail and a fine of $30,000 is the smallest fine he would look at. One of his smaller crimes was the violation of environmental laws. In the episode, The Ricks Must Be Crazy, he dumps waste from his microverse in a place that is definitely not right. Given the fact that he is dumping is probably radioactive, or at least extremely dangerous for the environment, a court would probably not be too happy about this. On the other side, he is dumping his waste in an uninhabited dimension, which could again be seen as a mitigating circumstance. For this, he would probably face only 3 years in prison and a $20,000 fine.
You're gonna have to do me a real solid.
Uh-oh.
When we get to customs, I'm gonna need you to take these seeds into the bathroom, and I'm gonna need you to put them way up inside your butthole, Morty.
In my butt?
Put them way up inside there, as far as they can fit.
Oh, jeez, Rick.
Do you still remember the mega seeds? Rick needs them for some kind of weird experiment in the very first episode. Unfortunately, his portal gun runs empty, and he has to go with the standard intergalactic travel. Now the mega seeds are illegal to transport, and he plans to smuggle them by having Morty hide them in a rather uncomfortable manner. And even though he justifies it with the fact that he needs the seeds for scientific research, this doesn't change the fact that it's illegal. If we look at US law, smuggling would give him another 5 years in prison with $10,000 in fine. Now let's get to the heavy crimes he has committed.
Oh, crap. Hey, what's up?
Hey, Rick! Here you go, 3,000 flurbos. Do you have the weapon?
Earlier, we already talked about the episode Morty Night Run, where Rick forced Morty to play the game Roy, and he made him witness a deal between him and Crombopulous Michael. Now let's take a closer look at the deal he is doing there. Rick is selling him a gun, which officially gets him in the world of arms dealing, which is a clear violation of law and regulation. The exact law for that would be the manufacturing and distribution of illegal substances, which in this case was a weapon. If Rick faced a court, there would be no way he would be going out of there with anything less than 15 years in prison and a fine of $50,000, especially because he supported terrorism and illegal groups such as assassins. Now, speaking of terrorism, Rick is also guilty of that. In the episode Get Swifty, giant heads appear in the sky, and he uses his portal gun to get into the governmental buildings, and the crimes don't end there. Once in the building, Rick shoots and kills multiple government agents, turns them into snakes, and blows up the US military equipment. Given the severity of his actions, I'm not too sure if they would take into consideration that his actions were aimed at saving Earth from potential destruction by the giant heads. I guess in most cases he would go with a life imprisonment, which we are going to classify as 25 years and a $200,000 fine.
No! Shoot! Now look, it's like a Where's Waldo page. Can you find me? Check out all these zany characters.
The episode, Total Rickle, is probably one of the most memorable episodes in the entire series. However, here Rick is also guilty of countless crimes. And while we could talk about the fact that Rick is guilty of spreading disease in the form of these parasites, there is something in this episode that would probably get him imprisoned for a longer time, which is kidnapping. See, to contain the outbreak, Rick is locking down the entire house and therefore effectively trapping everyone inside. In many courts, this has been seen as a form of kidnapping, and people have been severely punished for that. Now, the fact that Rick effectively kidnapped them to stop a disease from spreading will definitely help him, as it's a significant mitigating circumstance. But the question is, where does the court draw the line between protection and imprisonment? If a court takes this into consideration, it could still add another 10 years to his prison time and a fine of $20,000.
The portal gun. Slide it to the center of the room. Somebody confiscate that and don't damage it. They'll want it as a...
In the episode The Wedding Squanchers, Rick goes on a pretty huge killing spree against galactic agents. If you have the time, you can count how many agents Rick killed there, but it's definitely enough to classify him as a mass murderer in any legal system. The fact that he tried to protect his family will definitely help him. However, he has killed too many people, and every court will definitely give him life imprisonment, which we are again going to count as 25 years, and in some states he could even face the death penalty for that. So there you have it. Closing this case, Rick would definitely have to face 119 years and a $380,000 fine, And these haven't even been all crimes Rick has committed on his journey with Morty. If you are interested in seeing more cases and all the crimes he's committed, make sure to subscribe to our channel. With that being said, thanks for watching, and until next time.